All right, everybody, it's the Reformation Keegan, and I am back today with another comic analysis. We're going to be looking at yet another Batman title, but one that I find is a little bit under the radar, one that's not really discussed a lot, but I think one that has a lot of great stuff to talk about and just a really good story that you can sink your teeth into and really debate over. Almost like Arkham Asylum, there's a lot of intangibles here that I think aren't really brought to the table. And I think that this could really create uh, fun conversations, fun debates, and even create something that maybe none of us have thought of, and that's a new theory. One of the things that I wish I could do, that I would aspire to do, is run seminars one day if I ever decide to go past my master's and go for a PhD and teach some comic theory, because I think it would be a lot of fun to do. And I believe that a lot of comics tell some really, really intricate stories that we can debate over, and a lot of them are actually pretty true to life. Even though comics are a fictional world, there's a lot of realism. And if you watch my videos since the beginning, you'll know I discuss realism a lot when looking at the grander scale of the narratives. So I'm going to start with Batman, Gotham County line, and I'm going to discuss some things maybe that you haven't thought of, or maybe that you have but haven't expanded on. So we're going to get started. So this was a 3-issue miniseries in prestige format that was written by Steve Niles, that came out in 2005, specifically the last quarter of 2005, and concluded in December. I think it was a perfect time for this to come out because it was around Halloween time, and this story is predicated off of horror. So, in my opinion, this read like The Walking Dead, which I love the show. I've never really read much of the comics, but it read like it would be a Walking Dead story, and it has a weird but really cool mix of noir and western. So if you combine both together, that's what you kind of get in this. There's a really gothic feel to it. Not like Gotham per se. There's not that feeling of, mobsters roaming the streets. Instead, it's almost like a Clint Eastwood kind of story, but if you add zombies to it. So it's got a really cool mix to it. And it was a lot of fun to read. The stories were, I believe, just over 50 pages. But there was a lot of great art in this. I think the art was incredible. The prose by Niles was great too. So it was a perfect storm of a story. And there's a couple things I want to discuss. So one of the things is Batman sports a jetpack in this. And when I first started reading the story, I didn't know how to really feel about this, because I'm somebody who loves to stick to the original canon and stick to the original arcs of stories. I'm not saying that I don't like change. I do, but sometimes it catches me off guard. And Batman sporting a jetpack kind of caught me off guard on this. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I tried to look at it from a different point of view. And that point of view is that Batman doesn't really go outside of Gotham to go to suburbs or to save anybody else outside of Gotham City. Gotham City is his terrain. So he's out of his element. And Batman having a jetpack to go to somewhere where he normally doesn't go, I think, is honestly relatively intriguing, as long as it's not overused. And this story to me is more of an Elseworld. It kind of just takes place in its own timeline. It doesn't connect with Detective Comics or the Big Batman run or any other stories at the time. Instead, it's just its own universe in its own way, almost like the Gotham County line verse, or whatever people use, because they say the Snyderverse, the James Gunn verse, everything's got to be a verse in comics. I don't know why. I guess I blame Crisis on Infinite Earths for that. I don't know, but he sports the jetpack. I don't mind this, actually. I think it's cool to add a little bit of a layer to the character, especially because Batman can't fly. So Batman can just descend down with his wings, descend back up with using the utility belt, things like that. So I don't mind the jetpack. Honestly, I think it was a really cool addition, as long as it's used sparingly. Because when you have a new toy, you want to use it up just quickly because it's new, but you want to preserve it and use it when it needs to be used, because then you can add to the shelf life of it. It's like in writing, you don't want to overwrite too much. You want to write just enough to give your audience a hook, and then once you have that hook, then you can continue later and use hooks sparingly to keep them going. So I think it's actually advantageous for the character to have that jetpack at the end of the day. And Batman says he doesn't want to go past the county line, but immediately does when Gordon tells him that the security is at stake. So what I mean by that is the security of the people outside of the Gotham County line is at stake, and there is a major issue going on. And like I said, Batman usually only likes to stick to Gotham. But I don't know if I read this more like it was a favor, even though it didn't explicitly say that there was a favor. But to me, for Batman to go and solve this crisis outside of Gotham and kind of having to be convinced into doing it makes it feel like it's a favor of some sort. So my question is, does that make Batman unsympathetic? You can debate on that amongst yourselves, but I'm going to say it actually doesn't. I think it keeps Batman grounded and keeps Batman realistic, because the whole narrative of Batman is to protect Gotham City, and for him to go outside of that is very much out of character, unless if he's working with the Justice League. So is it a game of guilt? Is he guilting himself into doing it? Is Jim Gordon, who's retired in this arc, guilting him? I don't know. But I do believe that there is a bigger context to it, and I think that it's almost to a point that Batman actually has to say, well, I don't do suburbs. Okay, we understand that, but I think because there are more people at stake, that makes Batman want to go do it. And it's funny because during the story, when he's trying to save as many people as I can, one of the zombies guilts him and blames him for how they are now and the fact that they're dead, because he couldn't save everybody. And even Batman says himself, I'm sorry, I couldn't get to everybody. There's so many people that needed to be saved. I couldn't be getting 10 to 20 people at once. So it could have been even a game of guilt that he has before, because maybe before Batman has this trauma that he could not save everybody. So he doesn't want to put himself at stake if he knows that he's going to be outnumbered. That could be a possible theory. And the killer also has a theme, and it's funny because he kind of has a theme in the form of a trilogy, where he kills people in certain ways. So like he suffocates children, women are slashed, and then the men have their eyes taken out. So if you're looking at crime, a lot of killers, especially serial killers, they have a method to their madness, and they also have madness to their method. And they want to keep themes going. It's almost like a theme of OCD as well, where they keep getting away with the same act, so they're going to keep doing it the same way to repeat. And also it fulfills a void that they have that really nobody else can understand other than themselves, or maybe someone in any form of forensics. So I think that was actually very realistic. But I'm wondering like why the extremes are heightened, because you have a child that's suffocated. They don't really like the author Niles, he doesn't explicitly state whether the child's unconscious or not. He also doesn't say whether the women are unconscious or not while they're slashed. I'm assuming they're not. So these are very violent ways to die. And then the men have their eyes taken out. So it's also going to depend on where you're slashed as well. But I think having your eyes taken out is to the utmost extreme, especially when you're alive. That's probably the most painful, because I think with a slash, it's a cut, you bleed out, and then that's it. But I think when your eyes are taken out, you can feel that visceral pain and then done. So I don't know. That's something that I think can be debated over. And then Parsons, who's a suspect, he's apparently making sleeping agents. And before he's about to say anything, he's shot. And then we find out later that this is Detective Radmiller. And it gives you, again, another theme that the most unlikely of people are to commit the biggest atrocities and the biggest crimes. But when Batman tries to get him, he's hung, and his neck breaks. And then when he's a zombie, his neck also stays the same, kind of broken. And he hangs himself when he's confronted by Batman. Whether he's hung by Batman by accident or it's done deliberately, again, the comic will try to say one thing, but again, it's open to interpretation. Because a lot of times when people kill themselves, especially in front of people, there's the accidentally on purpose thing to try to frame somebody, but also a lot of them do it as an act of desperation to avoid the inevitable. So that also happens too. It can go both ways. And then he returns zombified. So one of the other things too that I liked was the incorporation of Deadman, because the whole time I think a lot of people are thinking that this is some curse, and that Batman is cursed. I don't think it's a curse. Actually, I think Deadman is almost like a Grim Reaper coming down from the afterlife to come tell Batman, like, hey man, this isn't really a curse per se, but this is you. Like, this is a full-on mental breakdown. This could have been hallucinatory in a lot of ways, because a lot of people who have gone through trauma, like Batman, they can hallucinate when they're under a large amount of stress, or if they are in a position where they see or feel things that bring them back to where they were in that traumatic moment. So I think that Deadman serves as that, to show, again, a hypothetical image of where, Batman could be and where Batman is and where Batman was in the past. So there's almost, again, this theme of past, present, and future. And I think Deadman isn't there to alleviate a curse. I think Deadman is almost there as it's going to sound paradoxical, but he's almost like a dead angel who is coming down, descending to help Batman relieve his own proverbial demons. So I think that's what the purpose of Deadman was, and I think it was very intriguing, because you can see Bruce Wayne inside Batman, inside the mask, within, breaking down, and then Deadman's almost there to kind of not console him, but to be there for him. And again, some of these souls are people that Batman couldn't save. And again, is it a game of guilt? Is it an illusion? Like, Parsons is also found alive in this, which is a really, really nice plot twist. And he shows Batman his basement of what he has. And it's Radmuller's parents. And what happens is they were basically ambushed, and they're chained up in the wall. And their son, who was the former detective, did nothing about it and sat there and wanted to watch their agony. So since he was a child, he apparently had an obsession with pain and an obsession for revenge, almost kind of Jeffrey Dahmer-like in a way, where as a child you can see the cracks, but you're in denial with it, so you're avoiding it as a parent. Because Jeffrey Dahmer's parents also said, well, he was a strange boy, but wasn't anything we suspected. So there's also, again, denial and knowing more than you lead on. And sometimes parents do that. It's just in human nature. But his parents here almost seem betrayed, like it wasn't something that they really expected. So in the third issue of this, Batman with Parsons brings the parents, and you can see Radmuller become that kid again when he sees his worn down, broken down parents, and he goes, Mom, Dad, kind of like that. And I think that's very revealing, because you can see the human inside the monster, and you can also see the monster inside the human. So a lot of duality here. And like I said, this almost feels like you're playing zombies on Call of Duty Black Ops, but you're not killing the zombies. So Batman feels like the character that you're playing in that, but you're trying to just wound the zombies and get them to where they need to go and block the barriers. That's kind of how I feel about it. Because like when in Black Ops, you would go inside buildings and you barricade the buildings and try and avoid the zombies, especially like if your health is at low. And really, I do believe in this story, Batman's health meter, if we're going to call it that, is almost at zero, because you can see mentally he's breaking down more and more and more, because one, this is traumatic, and two, it's a situation that he's never really dealt with, so he's really out of his element outside of Gotham. And we also forget too that Batman doesn't have really any extraordinary abilities other than his great detective skills, being a great fighter, and having that utility belt. He's still a human and he's still flawed, so he's prone to having these kind of issues when dealing with non-human entities like zombies, for example. So these issues can be very problematic for a human being, no matter what talents or gifts they've been given. So I think the perfect example to describe Radmiller is don't judge a book by its cover either, because you have him as a detective, and he's the one that's been killing everybody. And think of it, if you're a detective, you have a lot more power than most traditional civilians, and you have powers to weapons. You also have the power of being a detective, the power to make arrests, the power to dictate a lot of fates. So I think that's something to look at too, because detectives, cops, whatever you want to call them, police officers, they have the job and the liberty to make this world a safe place, but there are a lot of officers, again, this is a part of being human, who are selfish or can go into business for themselves and do something that is fulfilling their own proverbial void. So this is actually very realistic that there would be cops like this. And I think too, like one of the other things is that Deadman basically, throughout speaking with Batman, helping him out, exploits Batman's limitations as a human being, which is going back to my point that I made a minute ago, such as predictability too. So human beings are flawed because mentally they're not always strong, especially when dealing with tragedy, and two, human beings are oftentimes very predictable. But also, if you look at zombies, there's a predictability in their unpredictability of what their physical abilities are, what happens if you get caught by them, things of that nature. But these zombies are still they're still almost human. Like they're speaking, they're in like weird trances where they can talk about their tragedy, and then it's almost like these zombies have motivation. And whether the motivation is justified or not, you can debate that among yourselves. But I think that Niles gives a really good image of life and death here. And then what else I found awesome was how Batman's parents appear, also Martha, and they give him a reason, in my opinion. Whether this is hallucinatory or not, I think it is, but maybe he's talking to them in the afterlife. There's this biblical feel to me at the end where he sees them and he hugs them, and they give him a reason to look at life past death. And that's a paradox, that death is life, because sometimes you're living while you're dead. Just because your body is moving and you're around doesn't mean that you're not dead inside or dead mentally, or vice versa. So I thought that was a really, really poetic ending, and gave almost a sense of strange optimism, which I found intriguing. But here's a couple things that I wanted to point out. So Alfred becomes zombified, and he's talking to Bruce normally on the phone, and then all of a sudden he disappears. Nothing really happens. And the same thing with Jason Todd as Robin. He becomes zombified too, granted maybe not fully, and he just hangs around really. And it's almost like it doesn't really affect Batman as much, maybe because it's human beings that he trusts or still sees the humanity in them. That could be it. But maybe I would have liked that fleshed out a little bit more. But maybe I wouldn't either, because then we wouldn't be talking about it. Maybe, again, hermeneutic irritants. Maybe that was put as a hermeneutic irritant so we can sit and we can debate about this kind of stuff. Because what do we know if we're zombified? We don't know. Who's ever recounted it in a real logical manner? And who's even recounted it in general? Nobody. So how do we know? Is it even a hermeneutic irritant? Maybe not, because human beings, we feel like we have to know everything, and maybe simply we're not supposed to know. And maybe that's the beauty of it. Maybe that's why, Jason and Alfred are zombified and we really don't get an answer, because maybe there isn't an answer. Maybe in the afterlife we'll find our answer. Maybe. We'll see. But that was my analysis on Gotham, Gotham County Line. Let me know what you guys think. I thought this was a lot of fun to do. I really like the mysterious aspect of this. It reminds me of Arkham Asylum a little bit, which is a great thing because that's one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. And let me know in the comments what you think. I'm really interested to see what your theories are on this story if you've read it. If you haven't, I highly recommend doing so. It's a lot of fun. Read it at night. That might be actually fun. Or maybe wait till around Halloween time and read it. I don't know. But most of all, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe because we are close to 500 subscribers. And once I hit 3,000 watch hours, I can put out more content for you going forward and better content on top of that. So let's hit the like button. Let's hit the subscribe button. Let's hit the keyboards to comment. And thank you very much for all your support. So I'll be back relatively soon.